I hope you're comfy, hope you've got some snacks, because we regrettably do a little ranting in this video, so we might be here a while. It's just something I've wanted to kind of delve into recently. I hope that some good can come of it, even if it's just giving you all food for thought. Alright, let's get into it. You guys know those last online 8 years ago memes? Yeah, for the longest time, I straight up couldn't relate with that meme. I could sympathize with it, but not empathize, because I had just never experienced that feeling before. That is, until recent times. I've been playing ESO for about 4 years now, and despite being a pretty introverted individual, I've actually made a lot of friends during this time. It's one of the main reasons why I love this game so much, because of the connections I've made on it. Okay, that's enough sappy shit, let's get back to business. However, in these past 2 years, I would say, a lot of those friends have since left the game. For good. So I can relate to this meme all too well now. In fact, I may relate to it more than the average player, simply because of how frequently I'm exposed to this predicament. See, I'm also a guild master in ESO, so I frequently find myself having to pull up my guild's roster and kick inactive guildies to free up space for members of my community that are actively playing the game. Oftentimes, as I'm doing this task, I'll see the name of a guildie that I knew well and be reminded of their presence. A guildie who may have once joined us on the weekends for our community Zerg night, or perhaps a guildie who may have once been an avid raider, or a top seller, or a frequent chatter, or any combination of these aforementioned qualities. Hovering over their name in-game only to be greeted with a "last online X months ago" message is definitely a moment. I found myself leaving notes for my guild officers to not kick the guildies that really made a lasting impression in my community, despite them not being online in ages. But I am acutely aware that at some point I'm very likely gonna have no choice but to kick them to make more room. And I know I'm being dramatic, and I can always just toss them another guild invite if they do decide to come back one day, but it still feels bad, man. To see all these people that were once so enthusiastic and passionate about the game accompanied by a text box that reminds me that they no longer feel this way. At times, I even struggled to get my best friend to play ESO recently, despite the fact that he's been playing alongside me for a majority of these 4 years. A lot of the times that I can convince him to log in for a bit to join me for some PvP, he mauls over the performance, shits himself when he gets hit by some borderline exploit build, dies of cringe whenever some 3-head bests him because they're being carried by some cracked out mythic item that's locked behind a paywall, and then refuses to log in for another month or so. Frankly, it sucks. I miss my old ESO friends, man, and I miss my old guildies. And here in the script is where I'd go off on some long-winded rant that would have been topical had I not decided to change the direction of this video. The truth is, I wrote parts of the script a few months ago. I was planning on talking about the notion of ESO's lack of player retention in light of how frequently I've been finding myself writing those "don't kick" notes. And I was going to approach this predicament from a very different angle until the unexpected combat changes for update 35 happened. That timing, eh? So I scrapped a lot of what I had. Maybe I'll end up returning to it at some point, but given all that's transpired since the first mention of the combat changes, and given how many of my community members have expressed their desire to quit the game, I feel like some redirection's in order. I mentioned it in a community post, and I'll mention it again. I truly am not interested in dissecting all of the drama that's unfolded among the ESO community since the very first proposed combat changes. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. If you've been living under a rock and don't know what's going on, sorry, you're gonna have to catch yourself up elsewhere, but trust me, you won't have to search very far to find 15 different content creators discussing it in great detail. Rather, I'd like to incorporate fragments of my scrapped video idea into this situation. The only context that I'll give you is this. In recent times, a lot of people have expressed their disinterest for the direction that ESO has been taking. So much so that many have considered the idea of taking a break from or quitting ESO altogether. This notion has only been accelerated by the recently proposed combat changes, as well as the responses from the developers and from certain very vocal groups of players in the community. While it's fairly common for people to vocalize their dissatisfaction for game changes every patch, this time's been different. I can feel it. I've never witnessed so many communities up in arms over proposed changes. Many raid teams have disbanded. Discord servers are chock full of discussions and deliberations concerning this situation. PCNA's largest carry service and a keystone of the endgame community closed its doors. In my 4 years of playing ESO, I can't say I've ever witnessed anything of quite this magnitude. And although it's pretty commonplace for ESO content creators to address the developers of the game in their videos and demand changes, I'm pretty uncomfortable with this notion. I'm not a dev, you guys watching right now aren't devs, so what good is it gonna do for all of us to just scream into the echo chamber that's the YouTube comment section of some basement YouTuber, huh? Your constructive criticisms are best left on the forums. Rather than specifically focusing on what we'd like to see the devs do, I would also like to talk about something that actually does pertain to us, the players. Like I said earlier, the dev response or game direction seems to be only part of the problem. I think the other half lies within the community itself. We can observe this argument when taking a look at how Nephis, in a recent patch note review, kindly asked his viewers to please not share his content on the forums or on the ESO subreddit, because of all of the backlash and hateful comments that he's been receiving from a certain faction of the community. That's quite unheard of for a content creator to ask their viewership to not share their work as a result of how hostile certain groups of people can be. It's notions such as this one that I've been most curious about. That's what I'd like to use my platform to learn more about. I'm not a dev, but I do manage a guild and a community, and I think that I can at least have some influence on that. So I decided to ping everyone on my Discord server.
I know, how could I commit such a war crime? Please forgive me.
And asked everyone to once again lend me their opinions. I did this once before for a video and I had a fun time putting that one together, and I was eager to pick the brains of the gamers in the Tamriel Trade Secrets server once again, especially since I know that a lot of the server regulars have expressed their desire to quit the game or have actually already quit the game after the combat changes fiasco. So I asked those that were interested to fill out a questionnaire containing the following questions. Briefly describe how you play or played ESO. I asked this question to get a feel for the kinds of things that this person would evidently value when they play the game. Why are you quitting or considering quitting or no longer playing ESO? What's something that you'd like to see from the game that could potentially bring you back or revitalize your interest for playing the game? And lastly, what is something that you'd like to see from the community that could potentially bring you back or revitalize your interest for playing the game? I was curious to see where members of my community that found themselves no longer interested in playing ESO stood in regards to these two halves of the player experience. Something I noticed mere minutes after having pinged my Discord server and the answers started pouring in was that a decent amount of people actually didn't have anything negative to say about the community at all. In fact, quite the opposite. Of course, many still did, but I just wanted to point out this statistic because I think that it is very telling. While I very much intended on reading out every single response when I created this questionnaire, I didn't expect so many people to complete it. I didn't expect that so many people already had one foot out the door or had closed said door long ago. So rather than keeping you here all day, I have selected a variety of responses that I think best summarize all of the kinds of answers that I received. Thank you to everyone that took the time to voice their thoughts. If you'd like to take a look at all of the answers yourself, I'll leave a link to the form results in the description. This will allow you to sort by question, as I will not be presenting the answers in this format. As I'm reading out these answers, I implore you all to consider what you can do as leaders and members of communities, raid teams, events, PvP groups to make the ESO experience a little better for people. Keep an open mind and keep in mind that these are real people with valid opinions and concerns. That is why I'll be reading these responses individually rather than tackling one question at a time, so you can get a feel for the kind of player that's voicing their concerns and the kind of player that's considering leaving or has already left the ESO community. And if you've already made up your mind and, like these people, have already decided to quit the game, at least you'll be able to see where your thoughts line up with the rest of the communities. Alright, let's get into it. I was a general PvE/economy player. I was a hardcore player who led a small guild, a dungeon prog group, and was in a raid prog group. I was also in a merchant guild and took that fairly seriously, trying to sell as much as I could to maximize profit and prove myself as a top seller in that guild that week. Overland became boringly easy, quest stories were becoming very boring, I achieved a lot of my personal goals and had few in front of me. Much of my guild burnt out due to change fatigue, so I had fewer people to play with. I would like to come back, but the game doesn't seem to be adding interesting content anytime soon, instead focusing on minigames and changing things that weren't keeping me away in the first place. Fun and fresh systems that are relevant to the core PvE experience. Something like a new class, new weapon types, new type of PvE combat, a revamp of the PvE reward system. A very well-written story would also get me back in the game. Less hate towards players who just want what's best for the PvE endgame. See Nefis and BraviGotThis's videos on toxic casual/positivity. It doesn't sound like something that should keep someone away, but the hateful things that I've seen said to people who only want to play endgame content or help others do so really makes me not want to participate in this game at all. I'm a used to be casual player. In the last half year, I've started progressing towards endgame content. Currently, I have over half of the trials on hard mode. I like to do crafting, casual raiding, dungeons, and occasionally PvP. With the upcoming changes, the game will simply not be the same. The fundamentals of combat, my main reason for choosing this MMO, will be turned upside down. Most of my friends and the raiding communities I'm in have already quit, specifically because they were dissatisfied with Update 35, and without them, the game will feel far less exciting. Reverting even more of the combat changes, fixing bugs, and finishing the already started and then paused changes like hybridization. People trying out parts of the game that they've never explored before might give us a better understanding of each other. I used to be an endgame PvE player, got all my hard mode trials done up to Rockgrove. Now I do solo or small scale PvP mainly. Because Oakensoul broke PvP and Update 35 looks like a hot mess again, and I'm struggling to find something I enjoy to do now. I don't know, I've been around since beta and this is the worst that I've seen things. The social hierarchy of raiding drove me to quit raiding, and now the unbalanced mess that Oakensoul brought to PvP made me quit that. I hate questing and roleplaying isn't my thing. I need incentive, and ESO ain't providing. I'm a full endgamer with some trial trifectas like Godslayer and Griffinheart, and progging for the remaining ones. Previously, I was pretty much into trading, but decided to have a switch when I fell in love with hard mode content. It's very clear that the current developer team of ZOS despises the core mechanics of ESO, weaving, animation cancelling, etc., and resents the endgame community for embracing them and enjoying them. It's also clear that they have no clear direction of the future of the game. Even though they keep saying they have a vision, that remains a mystery for everybody. Their actions and their words conflict with each other, and I don't want to be a part of this sad comedy anymore. The embracing of what makes ESO different of other games, instead of pretending to ignore it. An MMO with high-paced, engaging combat, with multiple ways to do multiple different things. Don't try to be a solo RPG, pretending to be a placeholder for the Elder Scrolls 6, just to keep entitled whales happy. The unionization of the player community. We're all disconnected from each other. Endgamers, casuals, traders, our peers, housing mains, questers, and all in between. We should stand together instead of fighting with each other all the time. Very casual player, doing daily writs, questing solo or with a friend, never done trials, been playing for almost 2 years. Monotonous, becoming boring. Fixing the bugs instead of making more buggy content. I get kicked out of the game enough times in one session, then I'm not coming back. More endgame players who help teach mechanics for group content maybe, but the game would probably kick me out before we could complete anything. I almost exclusively do story content, single player achievements, and dailies, because I've run out of content that makes me want to play the game. More questing that's not contingent on suffering from sweaty PvP or PvE groups. A lot of communities surrounding the content I don't do seem so overtly negative regarding the game and the communities outside of theirs, especially to filthy casuals like me. I don't want to spend the little time I have listening to how Zos is ruining X Part 56 from a community external to me. If I spent the time, I could probably find groups of people running content I haven't that would love to just try to have fun, but when all I see is an exuberant amount of negativity, it just takes the wind out of my sails. I'm a sweaty casual who enjoys flipping and guild traders. I also love learning every motif and furnishing plan in the game. I do my daily dungeons with 18 characters. Everyone keeps talking about it, and it's starting to weigh on me, unfortunately. To only nerf the PvP heavy / light attacks and mythics, keep PvE the same, or make very small changes. Everyone to stop complaining all the time, making casuals like myself lose interest in the game. I'd consider myself casual, but before now, I've played regularly, daily. I would do dailies, dungeons, anything with some guildies, to be honest. To put it simply, I don't like relearning how to play the game every few months. They, Zos, change too much all the time for a casual player to really keep up. I spent a lot of free time getting my main and only character all geared out with the preferred armor from my class by grinding dungeons, only for it to become useless a few updates later. It really just makes you unmotivated and frustrated because anything you earn doesn't feel like it has value because it could just change later. I just want Zos to make up their minds when it comes to game mechanics. Changing things the way they are, this far into the game's life, isn't gonna help it survive longer. I think the higher end content and dungeons, trials, etc. are really intimidating to even consider playing because the groups I run into are usually really hostile if you aren't perfect or still learning. I was a relatively sweaty intermediate player that never really found a group to reliably get into vet content with. I would usually try to do 6 key pledges, farm different content so I could experiment with different builds, or grind some of my characters so they'd be ready to fill any role. My main DPS is a brittle warden and has multiple nerfs coming next patch that make it feel worse. My second most played DPS is a Templar, who also has changed timing for abilities, so it just doesn't feel right. The balance changes on the PTS largely miss the mark and seem to hurt intermediate players such as myself more than anyone, and don't really do anything to raise the skill floor when the super casuals spam light and or heavy attacks. I've lost a considerable amount of faith in Zos's ability to make well-executed balance changes, and my effort put into the game seems wasted. I broke my hand a few years ago and it never really healed properly. I can't spend hours parsing to get perfect timing, and going from over 85k to just over 60k DPS is a huge setback. Increased build diversity and viable alternative playstyles, more experimentation, more participation in project vitality, and actually playing around mechanics. A typical day on ESO would be scanning traders to flip gold and maybe an event daily if there's one available. Used to spend a lot of time in Cracklorn looking for trials or in PvP with friends and guildmates, but honestly, nobody seems up for doing that content anymore. There's nothing left to do. The rewards for content aren't great or aren't worth my time. The mounts for trifecta trials are nice, but there's not enough of that. Skins have become body marking rewards for the recent trials, and that's a big downgrade in my opinion. The sticker book has ruined the longevity of the game, as I can just recraft new sets once the meta changes without doing any content. A complete revamp of the reward system. There's simply not enough rewards, especially for some of the more challenging content. Add more skins, more earnable mounts, more outfits, polymorphs, etc. More patience and the willingness to learn. You have elitist players who won't take players under a certain CP into content, and you get newer players who don't seem to want to learn when you try to help. This makes an awkward middle ground for some players who have an understanding but can't get help to go further, which is a shame, as more endgame players is always a good thing. I'm a mid-tier player, I guess you could say. I do participate in dungeon trials, veteran trial hard modes, and trying for the occasional vet trial trifecta. I also participate in holding fashion contests, taking screenshots, housing, etc. Zos has for years been changing the combat to where it's not the same for every patch. There's no connection with the devs' goals and their actions. There's no direction at all, which is very much seen with these coming patch notes. With a radically changed system every 3 months, people will get fatigued and go play something else, like how I've started playing single-player games, and have also been considering Final Fantasy XIV. Stop trying to change the combat every single patch and not finishing the stuff before it. Please finish the hybridization that's been so preached about. This is just a little one, but bring in a photo mode, as every other MMO right now has one, except ESO. Playing with people is what I love doing most, other than doing what I usually do with screenshots and other casual activities. I think if the community and myself can get a sense of trust in the game, then I can definitely say that there would be more interest. I play open world outnumbered PvP. I have, however, completed dungeon and arena trifectas, and now and then I run 4-man VEC content. Poor performance, predominantly in open world PvP, and poor balance overall. Better performance in Cyrodiil, better incentives to PvP in Imperial City and Battlegrounds. A larger PvP population. I consider myself casual to mid-tier. On an average day, I'll do my daily crafting writs, dailies in the newest zone I have access to, and put stuff up on the traders. I chose not to purchase High Isle because I didn't think it was worth it to spend money on a card game I had no interest in. But without that zone, I missed out on the Oakensol Ring and the newest, most profitable zone dailies. I realize I've pretty much accomplished all I wanted to in the game, and without access to new, engaging content, because a card game ain't it, chief, I felt like I was stagnating. I think only a new class to play around with that has fun, strong, and visually satisfying class skills could bring me back. Honestly, it's the community that's kept me around after my interest started drying up. I don't think they could do more, and seeing how a number of people across my guilds are packing it up and leaving is sort of the writing on the wall for me. Players come and go, but I don't think the ESO community will be the same after update 35. I like dungeons and PvP. I've done a few dungeon trifectas I wanted the title for, but I don't participate in trials a lot, as I don't like big group content. I don't really like Cyrodiil or Battlegrounds either. I mostly duel or do IC in terms of PvP, and in IC I mostly run in a duo. I'm disheartened by the path that ZOS is taking. I know that next patch is playable because I've spent close to 40 hours on the Lost Depths PTS, mostly testing PvP builds, but also parsing a bit, and completing both new dungeon hard modes and making attempts for the Earthen Root Enclave trifecta. I just don't like the constant changes and seeming ignorance by the devs towards their more loyal player base. Instead, it seems like they're trying to attract more short-term players. I would appreciate it if the devs were more transparent and took polls of the community better. It feels like they cater to a specific group, and anyone who disagrees with them gets banned off the forums or Twitch or blocked on Twitter. I would appreciate it if everyone in the community was more understanding. Most people saying the new changes are good because it's causing players to quit don't understand the other players' perspectives and don't want to try, and vice versa. The whole community is far too stubborn. I typically log on and do writs and then try to do dungeons or trials, whether it be dungeon trifectas or trial hard mode / trifecta progression groups. I would consider myself more of an endgame player. I don't like the changes proposed with the PTS cycle of update 35. Revert the changes and have ZOS be more receptive to endgame players. A larger endgame community. A typical day for me consisted of writs on several tunes, daily world boss coffer farming on at least 4 tunes, and spending some time doing dungeons or looking for a trial. Before the announcement of update 35, I was in some veteran trial prog groups that I did once or twice a week. I also spent some time in Cyrodiil depending on the day. I'm taking this long break because ZOS is more concerned with changing working parts of the game instead of the issues that their player base has been pointing out to them. I think the combat is fine the way it is, but it's not fine that I can be in a dungeon, trial, or PvP zone spamming an ability that just won't go off, losing my ability to block, or have an instance glitch so bad it has to be reset and I lose the progress that I made. Performance fixes would definitely make me reconsider leaving. It'd be nice to see more diverse PvP communities, like a nice mixture of beginner to veteran players where we can all learn to improve and not have such wide skill gaps that turn people away from the activity. I play PvP in small-scale coordinated groups, solo, and rarely BGs. I only do PvE for the sets if I need them, like the Vate 2-hander and master weapons or monster helms. Mainly server performance, and the general attitude of the devs towards the game. Trying to make skill less rewarding is also a deal breaker. Better performance and maybe a nerf to proc sets, but just better performance would be good enough. Honestly, the concept of accessibility in the community. For example, a lot of casual players I meet don't want to improve as players, but they want the gap to be smaller. Players have a tendency to blame builds and sets, gatekeeping and lying rather than just trying to improve. Newer players, so I don't think I've been around long enough to be hardcore. Daily writs, pledges, dungeons, farming gear, mats, gold, etc. Was just starting casual trials and PvP. After putting in all those hours in a short time due to health issues and grinding gear, working hard to attempt to learn weaving, and trying to get gold and find mats for said gear, I'm really pissed that the game gear combat apparently changes every 3 months. Oakensoul has been a big help. Health issues make 1 bar better for me. The nerf to it is a slap in the face after being able to complete more content. Love my guild friends though. If I stay, they'll be why I do, unless combat becomes undoable for me. I already struggle with DPS as a disabled noob, and apparently my DPS is gonna drop even more and my gear might be worthless, and golding out stuff ain't cheap when you're not rich. I actually don't enjoy the light attack weaving mechanic because it's not explained at all to new players. There are 0 tutorials for anything actually. I'd like to see a stable combat system with tutorials, and would like to see better achievement rewards, and not have to buy so much with crowns. More access to trials. No one runs beginner Craglorn trials as a group, that I've seen, even the guilds that I love. I like to earn gold, do my dungeons, and be a slave to fashion. The community seems so on edge that everyone's at the point of saying they'll quit. Well, if they do and I can't queue up for stuff or find people to do trials with, then what's the point? I would like to see some more in-game earnable items that you have to actually grind for. And no, not a title. Less people making propaganda videos that flame the devs, though yes, some of what they do is dumb, but inevitably makes others enraged, panicked, or just want to quit. I literally downloaded Raft to just not think about the future of ESO and plant potatoes. Feel free to include that last sentence in the video. Relative to the average player, I would consider myself leaning hardcore with a casual mindset. I like challenging content like PvP and Vet DLC hard mode trials, but I also enjoy side activities like housing, outfitting, role-playing, and the occasional quest lines. My friends slowly drifting from the game, accelerated by update 35. The devs more concerned with pumping out crown store content than actual chapter content, tinkering with gameplay systems like it's still in beta rather than fixing long-standing performance issues. Prioritizing performance in general. I can't get through one gaming session that isn't hyper-casualized play without me or my group mates getting zossed one way or another. When you're really into the game, you take the bugs in your stride, but when interest starts to wane, you lose your tolerance for them. The constant doom and gloom on Discords and in-game can really kill your vibe, though I understand where it comes from. Some of it gets directed towards newer players who aren't jaded veterans and will not be so affected by the chaos. Let them enjoy the game for what it is. They may become the new blood to help revitalize the game. PSNA player here. Was DPS in 2 trial hard mode progs prior to High Isle. Now I spend my time questing, farming mats to sell, and doing dungeon achievements if my whole team is on. Dev team is extremely out of touch and don't seem to understand their own game at all. Can't say anything that hasn't been said so far. Update 35 is the main culprit. DLC trial hard modes need to be tuned down. This would make them more accessible and help repopulate the raiding scene. Endgame raiders gotta spend more time with those who are showing interest in endgame content. They weren't all that helpful to me when I was working my way up. My journey to 100k plus was largely thanks to build videos from Nephis. Shout out to him, his content made me a much better player all around. I did a bit of everything, but mainly hardcore PvP. Combat changes are horrific and consistently all over the place, making me lose trust. Investment in the end game, both PvE and PvP, and to revert entirely the direction that they're going with the combat system. To stop seeing any challenge in the game as inherently bad, because it means less people will be able to do it. ESO community is turning me into a hardcore gatekeeper. I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore player, but I do enjoy doing things such as dungeon hard modes and trifectas. I also sometimes do vet trials, but not very often. If people in guild chats are looking for people, I'll join in most of the time. I like playing PvP with friends, and I'll typically be doing this when I'm not PvEing. Zoss doesn't seem to know what they're doing. I'm not fond of the direction they're taking the game, and I think a majority of the player base feels a similar way. The changes for PvE make no sense, and the changes in PvP make no sense. At this point, I've realized that Zoss most likely won't change and will just keep getting bad patch after bad patch. I don't think I'll fully quit ESO, but I know for sure that I won't be playing as much. Fixing problematic things in PvP. The PvP in this game has great potential because of the combat, but in my opinion, it's not executed well. I'm not entirely sure, but seeing the community find common ground would be nice. The casual players don't understand the game from an endgame raider's point of view and vice versa. If the community wasn't so split, it could honestly help Zoss make better decisions when it comes to making changes. In the 4 years that I've been playing ESO without any breaks, I've experienced my fair share of unfavorable patches. I've endured patches where my main character's class got absolutely dookied on. I've endured patches where trials were broken beyond measure. I've endured some extremely unhealthy PvP metas that made my hairline recede by at least 5 inches if I'm being honest, and yet I'm still here. I have still logged on almost every day, even before I got into content creation, because I found that what I've valued much more than my main class's ability to perform up to par with others, more than the game's performance, and more than the state of PvP, I guess, has always just been the community. You guys carry this game. Now, I'm not saying to turn a blind eye to these other issues, of course not. I'm just saying it's because of so many of you that I keep coming back to ESO. I get the impression that the feeling's mutual for many others. Conversely, there are many players that have actually been negatively affected by parts of the community, as we've seen from some of these answers. While we can do our part in voicing our concerns to the developers by testing things out on the PTS and providing feedback on the ESO forums, and this may help in influencing the decisions made by developers, ultimately, the power is out of our hands when it comes to the direction and development of the game, for we are not ESO devs. But we are members of this community, so I think we can at least impact the health of that. From reading all of these submissions from people that are no longer wishing to play ESO or have already put the game down long ago, it's clear to me where the main issues lie. That being said, there are things that we can do to improve the ESO experience. I've compiled a list of the most frequently mentioned community-specific improvements and suggestions from that questionnaire. They are as follows. Be more inclusive when it comes to raiding and PvP. Give people a chance and teach others the ropes, as opposed to snubbing them entirely. As a side note, I would highly recommend the Project Vitality initiative, spearheaded by Nefis, an initiative to make raiding more inclusive and accessible to all. By the way, I had a gamer that asked in their questionnaire for a Project Vitality equivalent in other languages, and for console, if anyone's up for the task. Try out other parts of the game that you wouldn't normally partake in, even if it's just for a short duration of time, or chat with people who do, to acquire a better understanding of those that play differently than you. A lot of people express their desire for a larger PvE or PvP community, and I agree that this notion would promote a healthier environment. In order for that to happen, players will have to be considerate of one another. Veteran players should strive to be patient, and newer players have to be willing to learn. Be mindful of the unnecessarily inflammatory content that you promote to others, especially if you're a content creator, as this can encourage unhealthy arguments, and it can push people away from the game entirely. Strive to be constructive with your criticisms. I encourage you all to try to attempt these endeavors wherever possible. Or don't, I'm not your mom, but I'm guessing that if you made it this far in the video, you must give a damn about this game, and likewise, this community. As PandaPack said in their response to my questionnaire, we should strive to be supportive, excellent, and kind to one another in Tamriel. I urge you all to not lose sight of that when facing unfavorable game development decisions. As we near the end of the video, I just want to say thank you to everyone that helped me curate this video by sharing their thoughts with me and by sending in footage or allowing me to snoop around their homes for the B-roll. Although I'm not very stoked for this next update, I'll still be around, as I always have. And if you'd like to share your thoughts with me, or even go ahead and answer that questionnaire but in the comments, I welcome it, and am eager to hear what you have to say. But that's all for this video. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to my YouTube members for sponsoring this kind of content. Take it easy, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.